Okay, I think that we are live now on Zoom and on YouTube and on Facebook and of course here in person. I have 5 beautiful ladies with me here this evening and I'm so excited to cook for them and for myself, of course. Tonight we're doing breakfast for dinner. So we're gonna have muffins, we're gonna have pancakes, we're gonna have potato hash, we're gonna have tofu scramble. I made a little bit of salsa, we've got butter, well, plant-based butter, we've got maple syrup. And we were talking a little bit about breakfast for dinner before we started the video, and we all agreed breakfast is better when it's for dinner. There's just something about those pancakes that hits different when it's nighttime and not morning. Maybe because morning isn't everybody's favorite time. I don't know. I'm not going to cast any speculations out here, but let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do, because they take the longest to make, are the Morning Glory muffins. Morning Glory muffins, if you've had them before, are basically like a sort of sweet, but not too sweet, healthy kind of muffin with dried fruit and nuts and things in there. These are going to be almost exactly the same. The only difference is there's no eggs, there's no butter, there's no milk. So what we do in order to make it fluffy and moist is we substitute stuff. So the first thing that we did, I did, you'll do this at home yourself at some point, is mix flax meal, so ground flax seeds, with a little bit of water. And the handy bag will tell you exactly how much to mix, and the recipe will also tell you how much flax seed to mix with how much water. But it makes a really nice, well, I mean, you wouldn't want to just eat this, but you can see it's kind of gelatinous and goopy, and that's what's going to bind things together the way an egg would. Also, flaxseed is really, really good for you, so that's kind of a side bonus. The other thing that's going to make it really moist and fluffy is applesauce. For some reason, applesauce and mashed banana, when they're added to baked goods in place of eggs and oil, kind of miraculously makes them very fluffy and light, the same way a fat content would. Now, this does have a little bit of fat. We're going to be adding some coconut oil to it, but not that much. And it doesn't have any butter, it doesn't have any eggs, so this is still pretty healthy. So we're going to start with, how much? 1 3/4 cups of whole wheat flour. This is made with almost all whole wheat, but not all whole wheat. We've got a 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour going in there also. When you're using whole wheat, like all whole wheat, sometimes it can make the finished product a little bit heavy. So a lot of recipes call for just a touch of all-purpose flour to lighten it up a little bit. And that's what we're doing here, adding just that 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour to the whole wheat flour that's in there. We also have 3/4 cup of sugar. This is not brown sugar. This is coconut sugar. So one of the things that people who are plant-based or particularly vegan, especially for kind of like humane reasons, want to be careful about is white sugar, refined sugar, tends to be refined with something called bone char, which is exactly what it sounds like. So animal bones left over from processing are used to make the sugar very, very white when it's raw sugar. I don't know what the process, how it works exactly, but I know that that's what they use. So either get unrefined sugar or coconut sugar or maple syrup, which I've also used with pretty good success. So there's our sugar. So all these dry ingredients are going to come together first. We also have cinnamon. So it's going to be 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. And this is a 1/2 teaspoon measure here. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 of cinnamon. This is a very spicy muffin, lots of cinnamon and lots of ginger, which I happen to really love. I love the taste of ginger. And then just about a 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, because we don't want it to be overpowering. And then the other thing that's going to help give it some lift and help it to rise up when it's baking is baking powder and baking soda. So 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay. And then 1 teaspoon of baking soda. I'm not sure why baking soda has an expiration date. I'm pretty sure that I've had this box of baking soda for a really long time. So far, so good. It still does what it's supposed to do. I'm not complaining. And then a good healthy pinch of salt, because even your sweet stuff needs to be salted. That's what I think. When I was cooking with regular dairy butter, I always bought salted butter, even if I was making sweet baked goods like cookies or brownies or cakes or whatever, because sweet is too sweet unless you have a little edge of salt to help it out. Same thing with this. That's why we added some salt to it. So I'm just mixing the flours and the spices and the sugar and the baking soda and the baking powder and the salt in here so that we don't have any lumps. Better to do that before you add the liquid ingredients, especially when you've got baking soda and baking powder. I don't know if you've ever had a baked good like a pancake, which we'll make in a minute, or muffins or cupcakes or something where it hasn't been mixed very well while it's dry and you bite into like a little lump of baking powder. It kind of ruins the whole thing. I mean, I'll keep eating if it happens, but I won't be as happy, you know? So mix it around in there pretty well. These are all your dry ingredients and set that aside. Now here we've got my very favorite thing, which is the food processor, which I think I use this thing probably every day. I love my food processor, and I've actually used it more since I started eating and cooking plant-based. I don't know why so many recipes call for stuff to be ground up in here, but they do, and I'm fine with that. I really love it. So in here, we have a nice big apple and 2 carrots. And the great thing about this recipe is I don't have to shred them. I can just dump them in here and do it all in here. So not peeling the apple, a lot of the nutrients in a lot of fruits and vegetables is right underneath the peel. So if you can not peel a potato or an apple, or sometimes even a carrot, if you can just scrub it really well. These ones I did peel because, I don't know, for some reason I thought a baked good deserved something a little bit more refined, so I peeled it off. But apples, potatoes, anything else, if you can leave the peel on, a lot of those nutrients are right under the surface. And so if you can keep it on, do. So carrots, apples, here's a 1/4 cup of pecans. You can also use walnuts or any other nut that you particularly happen to like and you think would be good. Normally, I'm not a huge fan of raisins and stuff in my baked goods because they get kind of a weird texture. But these are being all ground up with everything else. So it's not going to be like biting into a great big soggy raisin, which is just not my favorite thing. So apples, carrots, pecans or walnuts, depending on what you're using, raisins, all of those go into the food processor. We're just going to pulse it for a few seconds so that it gets all chopped up and mixed up. Just making sure those carrots really get in there. I think a big lump of carrot would be a little disturbing. There you go. There's that. Now, we've got our fake eggs here. When I say fake eggs, I don't really mean fake eggs. It's flaxseed. But there's that. We've also got about a 1/2 cup of coconut oil. And we're just going to add that right to the dry ingredients. So 1/2 cup of coconut oil. And you can use canola oil or another kind of neutral oil if you like to. I like the way that this is unrefined coconut oil. Unrefined coconut oil still has a little bit of a coconut taste to it. In some foods, that can be off-putting. I've used unrefined coconut oil with some stuff, and I thought, this is not supposed to taste like coconut, but it sort of does. And that was a little weird. But in stuff like this, it's a nice note. They also make refined coconut oil, which has no flavor whatsoever. The reason I like to use it, the refined stuff for frying, is because it is another really high heat oil. So it's good for stir fries or other high heat cooking. So this is 2/3 cup of applesauce. And do for this, get the unsweetened, as close to just ground up apples as you possibly can. You could make your own, but why? There are some things where I look at the grocery store and I look at what I could be doing and I think, okay, I can spend 2 hours cooking down apples to make applesauce, or I can go get applesauce from somebody that's been doing it for a lot longer and can do it a lot better than I can and a lot faster. We all make choices. So make good choices, right? If you like to be in the kitchen, but you don't want to be in the kitchen all darn day, find something that helps you be in the kitchen as much as you like to and make food that you like to eat and it's good for you without burning you out. That's kind of one of the secrets of cooking. I think it is. I'm not an expert here. So I'm adding our flax eggs into there. And you can see as I'm dumping it in there, it really does have a very goopy texture, which is exactly what we want. And vanilla, you're supposed to, okay. You're supposed to measure vanilla, but I saw something, I think it was on Facebook just the other day, that said you measure vanilla with your heart. And I agree. So that's what I just did. So these are the wet ingredients, and we're going to mix them in. The thing about making muffins, pancakes, cookies, brownies, anything that is made with flour and also wet ingredients, you don't want to mix the heck out of it. Why? Because flour contains gluten. Gluten is great if you're making bread and you want to develop gluten as much as you can, because that's what makes bread really springy and stretchy and wonderful. But you don't want your cookies or your muffins or your pancakes to be stretchy and tough the way that bread is. You want it to be light and fluffy. So when you are making something where you're being called to mix in ingredients, don't mix it too much, because then what you'll end up with is something very tough and chewy and glutinous, which is fine for bread, but not what you want in other stuff. So as I'm adding kind of these wet but solid ingredients, the carrots, the apples, the nuts, the raisins, everything else that's in here, I'm going to kind of fold them in, but I'm not going to really go for it, because if I mix it too hard, then what we'll end up with is developed gluten in this dough, and that's not a good look, and it's not a good taste. There are some pretty big chunks of carrot in here, just 1 and 2. I'm just ditching those. It's not the end of the world if we miss a couple of pieces of carrot. Okay, so that's pretty much mixed, and that's why we mixed all of those dry ingredients first, because now we don't have to worry, since we did such light mixing. Once the wet ingredients went in there, now we don't have to worry quite so much about the baking soda, the baking powder, a big lump of ginger or cinnamon or something. It's pretty evenly distributed now. So here we have a muffin tin, of course, a dozen muffins, and I did spray the baking cups. The reason I did that is because when you're baking with something that is butter-free, not too much oil, no eggs, it will stick if you don't grease those up. So I did put some cooking spray in that. I'm not going to add a whole lot of fat to the final content, but we're just going to fill up our little cups here. And the oven was preheated to 350, just in case you were wondering. I have a friend who goes to one of my parishioners who is also one of my friends, and anytime we're cooking something, especially if it's something like muffins or a casserole or anything, I can just look at her and she says, I know, 350. It's like the magic temperature for baking things. I don't know why, but it is. It's just a nice, moderate temperature. It's funny because if you look at old recipes, I collect cookbooks, and so really old recipes, when they're not even dealing with gas stoves or electric stoves, I'm talking about like wood-fired stoves, say, bake over a moderate fire. And then you have to sit there and figure out, I bet that's 350. I could be wrong. We'll find out. But I'm pretty sure that means 350. And usually that's exactly what it means. So I think they just kind of, that's the universal moderate temperature for baking. Almost full here. And in just a minute, since I don't really want to get to my phone with my fingers covered with muffin batter, I'm going to ask somebody to time for 20 minutes, but not yet. Thank you. Get your phone ready, but don't start it yet. I'm still working.
20 minutes?
Yes. Right. Just filling these up a little bit more. We want nice, big, fluffy muffins. Okay. Rinse off my hands real quick. Okay, 20 minutes starts now. Now. Okay. I knew I could count on you. Thank you. Just going to move this food processor out of the way because we do not need it for our other dishes tonight. All right. Next up, pancakes. I'm going to go ahead and turn on our griddle. And I'm going to turn it on about medium. There we go. So the first step in making the pancakes is getting the buttermilk ready. So even if you are not cooking plant-based and you are dealing with a recipe that calls for buttermilk and you don't have any buttermilk, you can make buttermilk at home, and here's how. So this is almond milk. Obviously, I'm not using dairy milk for this. But, and I'm making a double batch because I don't know if you guys like pancakes as much as I do, but I freaking love pancakes. So I'm making a lot. Okay. So the recipe, a single recipe calls for only 1 cup, but again, I'm doing a double. So that's 2 cups of this plant-based milk. And then to make it soured, like buttermilk is, I'm adding apple cider vinegar. So don't be scared of using this. It does not taste like vinegar in the final product, but what it does is the acids in the vinegar work with the acids in the milk and cause it to curdle just a little tiny bit. But when you do that, it ends up tasting like buttermilk, and it also has a leavening effect, a lightening effect on the pancakes once they're cooked. So we're going to let that sit for just a minute. And in this, I'm going to add some vinegar too. You know, I'm just going to finish off. It wasn't that much. It's fine. I love vanilla. Vanilla is one of those things. I don't love the flavor all by itself, but when you realize how many other foods vanilla is added to make it taste more like what it should taste like, chocolate almost always has vanilla in it also because it brings out the chocolate flavor. So baked goods of every kind, even if they're not technically vanilla flavored, usually have vanilla in them because it makes the rest of the flavor stand out. Butter, in particular, tastes a lot more buttery when you have a little undertaste of vanilla along with it. The more you know. So the dry ingredients here are flour, and this is made with all-purpose flour. I have never tried to make these with whole wheat flour because, I don't know, I'm pretty healthy, but I'm not that healthy, and I do love really light, fluffy pancakes. So this is just regular all-purpose flour. It is unbleached, so do try and stick with unbleached flour if you can. So just, again, just like we did with the muffins, it's the same thing. This is a quick bread. It has no yeast. It's not supposed to be chewy or tough or anything. So always mix the dry ingredients with your muffins, your pancakes, your quick breads, cookies, all of that. Mix those first before you add any wet ingredients that are going to start toughening up that gluten. So this is flour, it's sugar. So I'm using that coconut sugar again, baking powder, some salt, and then, you can't really see this, unfortunately, very well, but I'll show the folks that are here without spilling it all over the floor, I hope. You can see it's a little bit curdled, okay? It doesn't look very appetizing this way, but it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So fear not. I'm just going to pour all of that in, and still with a fork, you could use a whisk also. I'm just incorporating this liquid into the dry ingredients as quickly as I can. And I can hear it already. So it's really cool because when you do this, the baking powder that's in the dry ingredients and then the kind of manufactured buttermilk that we just made is having this great reaction. Did anybody ever make one of those volcanoes when they were in elementary school or middle school, where you put the baking soda inside of a paper mache volcano and then you pour the vinegar in it and it goes? That's what's happening in here, just kind of on a lesser scale. So just mixing until all of the ingredients are incorporated. Okay, and then we're going to let it sit there for just a minute or so that all of that stuff gets nice and bubbly and thick. It's a very thick batter, but that's good. That's what we want. I have a 1/4 cup measure here. You can use bigger cup measures if you're making bigger pancakes at home. I really like the silver dollar size pancakes. And I also have some fresh blueberries over here. Does everybody like blueberries? Okay. I can always make some without, but why? They're so good. So here's our griddle. It's nice and hot. And I don't know about you, but It might be the fact that we have test pancakes before we have actual pancakes. And it took me the longest time to learn how to make pancakes. You would think those are fairly simple, and I guess they are, but you have to have patience, which is not my strong point, because you have to wait until the top has all of those bubbles that have popped on the underside before you flip it over. And I would be in such a hurry to just cook the darn pancakes so I could eat the pancakes that they were always squishy in the middle. So pancakes are now my moment of zen, because I have to just pour the batter and breathe and watch the bubbles and become one with the pancake, and then I can flip it and then I can eat it. The other thing is the blueberries don't get incorporated into the batter. They get added when the pancakes are just about ready to flip over. So when I see that those bubbles are popping, I'll drop some of those blueberries on there and then I'll flip them over. It makes it a little bit easier. It just makes it easier. So we have those nice and hot, ready to go. This is a very lumpy batter. It's also a very fluffy batter. I know you can't tell, but I can tell already that I'm going to have to turn up the heat a little bit. So that is what I'm going to do. Okay. So this one, I think, probably not at our best. The other thing you can do is get a little bit of water. That's more like it. I don't know if you folks at home could hear that sizzle, but I'm sure all of you could. That's what pancakes are supposed to sound like. So this is a very thick and fluffy batter. And it holds its shape pretty well too. And hopefully the shape that we get is, round. If it's not, they still taste good, so don't worry about it. While that's going, I'm going to turn the heat on of this pan for our hash, because I want it to be a good hot pan by the time we get to it. Medium high. No. Okay, so these pancakes, this one, it was still a little cooler than we would have liked on this side. This one, we're starting to see some action, which is good. I'm going to go ahead and drop some blueberries in here. And that way they sort of sink in to the rest of the pancake. I'll go ahead and put some on this one too. This is by far our test one, but I'll eat this one. This one I'll take for the team, because he's not going to be our best one to start. Actually, doesn't look bad. So you can see, maybe you can see on the camera, maybe not. These are very, very fluffy. They're puffing up really beautifully, which is exactly what we want. So they're rising right off of that griddle, which is great. If you don't have one of these griddles at home, get one. They're fantastic. I wish it was a little bit bigger, but I do a lot of different things on this. The last cooking class we had, I actually made the pita bread on the griddle. This time we're making pancakes. You can do all kinds of really cool things. And the other side has raised ridges like a grill, so I can do grilled vegetables inside too. And it turns out really well. So I'm going to try this one out for myself, just to see how we're doing on the inside. Yeah, see, this is my biggest problem. Impatience. But these ones are coming along a little bit drier on the inside, which is what we want. And now our griddle is getting very nice and hot, which is good. So we're going to keep making these pancakes. Yes, get the blueberry right into the garbage can. Spray it down again. And also, I try not to use too much oil when I'm cooking, but there are some things that really do call for a nice slick surface, and pancakes is certainly one of those things. I don't coat this griddle with oil, as you can see, but a good spray really does prevent ruining your pancakes and having to start all over again with a different pan, which can be kind of annoying. So, okay, adding those. That's fine. Let me get a little bit more of a full plate of pancakes before I start passing them around to people. Yeah, this one was way underdone, but I'm going to try just a little bit of the dry batter on the edge. And at least the batter tastes good. So now we're seeing some bubbles rising up on that side, which is great. I'm going to turn down the heat just a tiny bit. I don't want them to burn. And the ones in the middle are getting a little overdone. And in the meantime, while we've got those pancakes going, I'm going to add some oil. Now for these, for the potato stuff, I am going to add a little bit more oil than I ordinarily would because this is a lot of food going in here. And before the class, what I did was kind of par cooked these potatoes. Par cooking means, or par boiling or whatever, just means you're cooking them a tiny little bit before you cook them. So potatoes are softened up a little bit in the microwave before I started to get them as a part of getting them ready to cook on for our hash tonight. The reason I did that is, and you can cook them from raw if you have the time, but it goes a little bit faster when you cook them a little bit ahead of time. So that's what I did. And you know, if you know food purists that kind of down on you for using a microwave, just smile pleasantly and walk away. That's all I can tell you, because microwaves really do have their place in all kinds of different cooking. And I don't pretend to be a gourmet chef. And I've read a lot of books, and Anthony Bourdain, Saint Anthony, blessed be his name, may he rest in peace and rise in glory, had a lot of nasty things to say about microwave cooking in gourmet restaurants. And he's right. But at home, when you're in a hurry and you have a huge batch of potatoes, just put them in the microwave. It's fine. Nobody's going to come to your house and arrest you. The food police probably won't know. So it's really handy though to do that, and it makes the cooking of the hash go a lot faster, because cooking raw potatoes in a frying pan takes a long time, just so you know. So we're really coming along here with our pancakes. I hope I'm not burning these. That is pretty hot. It's just that the griddle had to get up to speed. So we've got oil in here. We've got here jalapeno. Everybody okay with spicy food? It's not terribly spicy. Okay, so onions, jalapenos, and bell peppers are in here. And then all of these potatoes that have been par cooked in the microwave first and then diced up, I'm going to go in on top of that. And we're just going to do our best to spread it out as much as we can. And I'm going to crank up the heat a little bit more, and then I'm going to put the lid on. And then I'm going to flip these pancakes and hope that they're not burned. Hooray. Well, that was a little burn, but that was all right. So you can always tell where the hot spot is. That's the hot spot. So I just have to be a little bit more careful with that one in the middle. The problem with this is, on an industrial stove like this one, the griddle can only sit on one burner at a time. So I'm doing my best to kind of navigate the hot spots here. But hopefully you can see how nice and fluffy these are turning out. So I'm going to start setting these pancakes out. You guys can come and grab a few, one or two. You've got plant-based butter and syrup on your tables there. So feel free to make use of that. This is your appetizer, your blueberry pancakes. They're not going to walk over there and put themselves on the table, folks. Make it happen. Beautiful. Okay, so the other thing I want to show you is, and I'm going to pull this cutting board up towards the front so that everybody at home can see me and so that you guys here can see me. That is, as soon as I flip these pancakes. Multitasking is really going to be the death of me one of these days. You know, it's not actually possible for people to multitask. What you're actually doing when you think you're multitasking is something called switch tasking. It's true. It's not, no, that's what it's called. That's actually what's going on. Your brain really can't do more than one thing at once, even if you think it can. So what it's doing instead is, even if it's for a millisecond, is drawing attention away from what you were doing and putting it towards what you're about to do, and then putting it back to where you had it before. And it feels simultaneous, or like it's all happening at the same time. It's actually not. And that's why people should not do distracted driving, because you can think that you're paying attention to the road and texting at the same time, but you're actually not. So there's your public service announcement for the day. You're welcome. Switch tasking, that's right. All right. Not quite yet. So what we're doing is, this is really sizzling nicely. We have a nice even coating on the bottom here. I'm just kind of stirring it around so that everything gets evenly cooked. But what we're really hoping for is that it gets nice and brown. So I'm going to crank up the heat a little more. And the reason I can crank up the heat without too much worry is because there's a lot of moisture in here, because we've got fresh peppers, 2 kinds of fresh peppers, fresh onions, and so that moisture is going to keep it from burning, and it's also going to kind of steam those potatoes so they get even a little bit softer and more cooked all the way through than they were from the microwave. But we do want them to cook hot, and we do want them to fry a little bit. So again, spreading them out, turn up the heat, and I'm covering them again so they kind of steam fry at the same time. How are the pancakes? Are they actually cooked? Would you tell me if they weren't?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I really like these. This is one of the few plant-based things that my husband will actually ask for. Usually he's like, are we eating the plant stuff tonight? Yeah. Well, that pancake dropped. That will be mine. I am a big believer in the 30-second rule, guys. All right. A few more pancakes for everybody. You are welcome. All right, so now that the pancakes are done and I can stop switch tasking and actually pay attention to what I'm doing, I have showed people this trick before, but maybe you guys haven't seen it before. Cutting a bell pepper in the easiest, most effective way. I learned this years and years and years ago, and it's something that I come back to all the time. And I know that if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, or you've attended one of the cooking classes before, I know you've seen me do this, so please just bear with me. I still think it's an awesome trick. So you cut off the top, that blossom end, set it aside. Cut off the bottom end, set that aside. So you stand it kind of on its end like that, where it's been cut, and cut straight down. Then you use the knife to cut the ribs out. And as you cut, you're kind of unrolling it. So there you've got all of the ribs and the seeds out in one chunk. And then you can just kind of lay it out flat and do whatever you want with it. So if I want it diced up, here I have a nice flat piece of pepper. I cut that in half, and then I cut them into the size dice that I want. It's a lot easier than other ways of wrestling with a bell pepper. So don't say I never taught you anything, but there is your diced green pepper. So I'm going to add those to the hash too. They'll be a little bit less cooked than the other stuff. But of all of the cooking hacks that I have, that's one of my very favorites. One of these days we'll dice an onion, and I'll teach you how to do that too in a really fun way. I know that's really exciting, dicing an onion. But it's the little things, it's the little techniques that end up saving you a lot of time, because they all add up. Oh yeah. So we're starting to get a beautiful brown crust on these potatoes, which is exactly what we were going for. Beautiful. Hooray. Oh, yes. So this is really more like home fries than hash. I'm not sure what the difference is, quite frankly. Maybe it's the size of the cut, or that it's, diced up really big and not shredded. But fried potatoes is what we're going for here, and that's what's happening. So Again, I just keep throwing them around and then spreading them out again and trying to get as many of those unbrowned pieces on the bottom as I can. The other thing I'm going to do is move this griddle out of the way.
Muffins are ready.
Thank you. See, this is why I need outside help. So before I turn the oven off, what I'm going to do is test them out with a They might have to go in for just a minute more, but I hope not, because I can't wait to try them. They smell so good. Maybe 2 more minutes. Can you give me 2 more minutes? Thank you. They're still a little bit wet in the, not wet, but, all right. So 2 minutes. That's what I was going to do. See, people with short attention spans like me really should not try and multitask or switch tasks, because I forget what I'm doing. So I'm moving that big griddle out of the way, and this big frying pan is what I'm putting here, because we're going to start talking about our tofu. So I know that's not going to need super high heat. Put that there. This is exactly what we want to see. This is going to be so good. I cannot wait for this hash to be ready. So it's the same process, just kind of scraping everything off the bottom, lots of good flavor. I'm pulling up as much onion and little bits of potato as I can. Don't worry about it if it sticks, that's fine. Kind of a nice little protective crust, and we're still getting a good surface on our potatoes. So before I cover it again, I am going to turn down the heat just a smidge. I'm also going to add some garlic powder. Because this is kind of long cooked on high heat, I usually don't like to add fresh garlic to this hash because it will burn, and we don't want that. So garlic powder is what I use instead. Some smoked paprika. A good sprinkling of salt. Make sure that's all mixed in there. And the paprika really gives it an appetizing color too. It kind of increases the golden color of those potatoes. So once I have that spread out again, the last thing I'm going to add, I see my muffins are ready. I heard it. Thank you. I'm going to spread some mushrooms out on top here. Put that lid back on. Muffins. Beautiful. Oh, these smell so good. That was hilarious. The first time when you said the muffins are ready, I'm like, how do you know the muffins are ready? You're all the way over there. Oh, right. Because you're doing what I asked you to do. So I'm going to grease up the pan here for our tofu. This is medium firm tofu because they didn't have the regular firm or extra firm in the grocery store, but it's fine. And this is much easier to deal with than other tofu recipes because you don't have to freeze it, you don't have to press it. What I do is I take a chunk of it and squeeze out just in my hands a little bit of that liquid, and then just add it to the pan. So you don't have to go crazy getting all the moisture out, but just some of it, because if most of it's going to steam out of the pan anyway. And perfect. Okay. So you'll notice some of it seems as though this breakfast menu or breakfast for dinner menu is kind of carb heavy, but almost all of it is whole grains because we're dealing with whole wheat flour for the muffins. The other thing is lots of vegetables, especially when you consider the hash. The tofu is pure protein pretty much. And the other thing is carbs are not your enemy. I know there's a lot of what I would really call fad diet science out there that's not really even science saying that you shouldn't eat carbs. You need those. You really, really need those, especially if you're active especially if you want to keep healing when you get injured. If there are not many things that you can eliminate from your diet, huge groups of food. And I know that sounds weird as someone who doesn't eat meat or dairy, but there's not much that they've found in meat and dairy that are absolutely necessary for our survival. Carbs, on the other hand, you really do need them, and fat too. So fat is not your enemy either. You have to have fat that helps to kind of line some of the, especially in your brain, some of those brain cells and connective tissue. You will be hurting for certain if you don't have some of this stuff. And anyway, if you're eating it for actual breakfast, that's when you should have carbs. So try not to worry too much about all of that. It's food, and if it's good quality food, it's doing you a favor. So please try and think of food as your friend as often, as much as you can. There's my little PSA about food in general. You're welcome. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit. So these are two really cool spices that I want to talk about as soon as I check on our hash. We get these mushrooms incorporated in there. Oh my goodness, this looks amazing. But it's potatoes. You can't go wrong with potatoes. I mean, I don't think I've ever had potatoes cooked in a way that made me say, well, I don't like that. It's potatoes. What is not to like? Well, I hope you guys do like it spicy. Those jalapenos are, that's the problem. Jalapenos, you can never tell. You can just never tell until you're eating them what they're going to do. All right. So our hash is almost done. So I'm going to talk to you about these really cool spices. The first one, and I think I've talked about turmeric before. Turmeric is a wonderful anti-inflammatory. In fact, I've used tea from it when I'm coming down from a workout that has made me very sore. A little bit of turmeric tea with ground pepper. There's something about the piperine and ground black pepper that activates the turmeric a little bit more. So it's a great anti-inflammatory. It's also a really nice color. It's this beautiful bright yellow. So I'm going to sprinkle just a little tiny bit on our eggs, and it's going to make them look like yellow scrambled eggs. And it's also really, really good for you. So I'm just incorporating some of that turmeric in there, and it's this crumbled tofu is turning this really nice yellow color. Might add just a little bit more, but you can see it transforming into this really nice lemon yellow, eggy sort of color. You do want to be a little careful with turmeric because it can be bitter. So always put on a little bit less than you think you need. But somebody eating this, the way that food looks really makes a difference. So somebody that might be a little shy of eating straight up tofu might feel a little better about it if it looked like eggs and if it smelled and tasted like eggs. So that's when this other spice comes in. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. This is black salt, also known as kala namak. It is a salt with a really high sulfur content. So it smells and tastes like eggs. And it also functions as seasoning. So it's really, really cool. So I'm just going to add some of this black salt. It's not really black in color. It's really more kind of a pinkish color. But I'm going to add that in with the tofu and the turmeric. I'm going to taste a little bit of it to see if I need more of one or the other. It really does taste like eggs. It trips me out every time. I just can't believe it works. So you can use this actually in any dish that calls for an eggy flavor. You can even use it in some baked goods for that same reason. And then I know that when I have scrambled eggs, or when I used to eat scrambled eggs, I like it with lots of pepper. So I'm going to add lots of fresh ground pepper to this as well. So I can get the lid off. All right. That does it for our eggs. Wait till you see these. They're so fun. Okay, so here we have our scrambled tofu, which really does just look like eggs. Let me get those on a hot pad for you. And another hot pad. And our hash is done. And the other thing that I have in the oven, staying nice and warm, is some tortillas. I tend to like tortillas more than I like toast these days, because you can, ooh, that hash is potent. Because you can wrap things up in it. So whole wheat tortillas are here. Here is our tofu scramble. Here is our really spicy. Oh no. Well, I don't know how spicy it actually is. It seems as though it might be. So, but it also seems as though it might be delicious. So let me show this to our lovely audience watching from home. This beautiful, crispy hash that we have going here. It's probably not all that spicy, but here is our hash. Beautiful browned potato hash. And finally, we have our wonderful fluffy muffins. Let me get these on a plate. Okay. So here we have our muffins, and that is our breakfast for dinner. So we already have had the pancakes, which they said was a hit. I hope they're telling me the truth. We have our hash, we have our eggs, we have our muffins, we have our tortillas. There's also some homemade salsa, and I believe the recipe for that is on the Plant-Based Priest website. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it is. If it's not, I'll take a look and I'll post it on Facebook because it's super easy. It's just canned tomatoes and some other stuff. It's very, very simple to make. But that is our breakfast for dinner. 2 weeks from now will be our next class. I was thinking Mexican, but then I started researching vegan tapas, like Spanish tapas, like a tapas bar. So I'm thinking that's probably the direction we're going to go in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned to find out which way we're going to go with that, and if we're going to do that or what we're going to do. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, everybody. Remember, you were created by love for love. So please go out and be love. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.